Hello, today is December 7th. Happy holidays. My name is Dr. Carrie Arnold. I'm the Program Director for Evidence-Based Coaching at Fielding Graduate University. Welcome to this Coaching in Context webinar. I'm really excited to have Dr. Deepa Awal here as our presenter. Before I introduce her, just a couple logistical things. The session is being recorded and is eligible for an ICF CEU if you are here live and attend the entire hour. I will be taking attendance, and about 45 minutes into the session, I will post an evaluation link in chat. Please copy that into your browser and complete the evaluation within 24 to 48 hours, and then we can issue you an ICF CEU. Those will be issued by the registrar's office at Fielding Graduate University, and they typically come 2 weeks or so after the session. This is a session where not only are we recording it, but our presenter has agreed to share her slide deck. So wanting to let you know in advance, and that will be emailed out to everybody who registered for the event. All right, so then we go ahead and introduce Deepa. First of all, Deepa is faculty at Fielding Graduate University. She's an associate faculty member in the evidence-based coaching program. She's an executive coach with a PhD in organizational development and behavior. She's also a master certified coach. Her superpowers are in somatics and ontological coaching, and she's such a gift to the program. I enjoy every moment I get to spend with her. Unfortunately, we've never been in the same room together because of the pandemic. She's from Philadelphia, so we were just talking about the next time I'm in her city, how I look forward to being able to have a cup of tea with her. And so enjoy this time that you have with Deepa and the gifts she brings. And Deepa, I'm going to turn the floor over to you real quick because of the rich content she's bringing. If you have questions or comments, please add them in chat. I will be monitoring that as she presents, and I'll ensure your questions are fed to her throughout the session. Thank you. Deepa, it's all yours.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you. And welcome, everyone. It's so good to see familiar faces and new faces, people I've worked with. Gosh, it's heartwarming. I'm already losing my nervousness. So thank you for that, all of you, bringing your beautiful selves. So I'm going to be talking about emotions today, and I just want to share the lay of the land. Before we begin, I'm going to share a little bit about the empirical evidence on emotions. Some of our clients are reluctant to go there, and I think if we are grounded in some of the evidence that is also science-based, it can only help. I'm also going to be sharing why it's important for us to be familiar with the emotional territory as coaches. I'm going to be sharing a couple of frameworks that may be helpful for you as you work with your clients. So that's really my agenda. And I have to sort of say that these are only a couple of frameworks that come from my training as an ontological coach. There are many other frameworks out there that I respect, sometimes use, but I will not be able to share everything with you guys today. Let me just first take a moment to help us all be present and together in the room. And I thought the best way to do this was to read a few verses from a poem that touched me very deeply. And poetry is sort of at the nexus of cognition and feeling. So as I read this, just sort of settle into your chairs, open your heart space, and just allow the words to land gently on you. There's no need to grasp. You have a version, you have the full poem in your presentation deck. So just listen, let it land, allow the words to speak to you, and I will give a little bit of silence after the poem, and then at the ring of the bell, the silence is complete. So this is a poem taken from a book called If You Knew Me, You Would Care. And it's written by Zainab Salbi and Renio Malfredi. Zainab Salbi is from Iran, and she now lives and works in the United States. If you knew me, you would care. What if I am not sadness? What if I'm not grieving? What if I'm not my victim's story, nor am I my pain? What if I'm joy without reason, happiness in all seasons? What if I'm love for all? What if I laugh for no reason and all reasons? What if they are all a part of me? What if I see without judgment? I love without reason? What if I give and receive without worry? What if I can be all and still be me? How would life be if I let it be? How would I be if I accept fully me? What would I be if today I am free? What if this is the new story? How would life be if I let it be? How would I be if I accept fully me? What would I be if today I am free? What if this is the new story? Thank you all. So I'm going to share a little bit about what drew me to choose this topic. Oops, I'm just hoping the fire alarm in the building doesn't go off. Oh my God, they're going to be checking the fire alarm in the building. It's not a fire alarm per se, but they're checking it. So if there's a noise, I'm just going to allow my screen to say it all.
Deepa, I cannot hear anything right now in the background, so I think you're okay.
Okay, very good. So what drew me to choose this topic is when I coach in the emotional domain, with the permission of the client, of course, I find special kind of satisfaction because sometimes it allows the client to see something they had not seen before. Coaching in the emotional domain has also provided me my learning edge because it has forced me to look at my own emotions. And that has been a challenge and an opportunity. Once emotions are seen, I find clients are more likely to take action. And the body-mind connection with my somatic training has become easier to work with. So emotions that are held in the body are often so persistent and so resistant, sometimes to being seen, certainly to being acknowledged fully, that connection has also led to an enhanced capability of dealing with emotions, and I've really sort of appreciated that. And last but not least, emotions reside in the body and can influence behaviors for generations. That too has influenced me to work in this domain. So that being said,
90%.
I'm going to move into sharing. As I prepared for this webinar, I asked myself, what is it that I have learned about emotions? So what I've learned is that as humans, we feel. Emotions are a part of our biology. As humans, we also have desires, we have aspirations, we have longings, and these are predominant for us as human beings. They drive us. I've also learned that body, mind, and emotions are integrally linked. I've also learned that when body, mind, and emotions are in sync, when we are including them all and aware of them, there is a certain presence in our way of being and a trust in our actions. So, what is the empirical evidence for what I'm sharing with you? That, emotions are a part of human beings, that body and mind and emotions are integrally linked. So I'm going to go a little bit into that. And if there are questions that are arising, please feel free to put it in the chat. Much of the research on emotions, can you hear the background noise, guys? And is it disturbing you?
Deepa, it's totally fine.
Wonderful.
It's so minor, so I know it's disturbing you, but we can live with it.
Wonderful. So much of the empirical research on emotions has been done by neuroscientists and psychiatrists. And the couple of quotations that I'm sharing with you right now come from a book called A General Theory of Love, written by 3 physicians who are psychiatrists. And they've done a bunch of research, and they provided some caution on using the scientific lens to look at emotions. Couple of quotes I will repeat. They say that emotions are subjective and personal. This we know. They also suggest that we balance a respect for proof with the fondness for the unproven and the unprovable. So there's a word of caution coming at us from the scientists who are doing research on emotion, that while we can look at the scientific proof, we've also got to keep an open mind. So our experiences of others are equally valid in this inquiry into emotions. Having said that, one of the neuroscientists in the 60s who really contributed to the research in the emotional domain was Paul MacLean. He put out an evolutionary theory saying that the brain can be we have 3 kinds of brains. One is the reptilian brain, which is responsible for the autonomic functions like breathing, swallowing, and it also responds to loud noises or movement. So it's aware of this, it sort of incorporates the startle response. The second thing he found was that as we evolved from reptiles to mammals, that's how he was studying this evolutionary process. His contention is we developed a limbic brain, which is the emotional seat, consisting of the amygdala and the hippocampus. And mammals have a limbic brain. And he found when he was doing his research that the mammal mothers would take care of their offsprings. They would also sing to them. They would feed them. They would play with them. So he attributed to the development of a second kind of brain, which he called the limbic brain. And the neocortex, which was the last aspect to develop and which we as human beings use a lot in our society, is responsible for speaking, reasoning, writing, planning. It's what we call the left brain activity. And some of these functions have been identified, but many still remain to be identified. And his contention was that each of these houses neurons that perform a different function. So while this distinction was helpful, it met with a lot of criticism. People said, other scientists said, it's not really evolutionary, what you're pointing out. These three brains sort of grow together, et cetera, et cetera. But it was a good beginning for exploration into the emotional brain. The next set of research came from a group of scientists Joseph Ledoux and Candace Pert in the early 90s. Joseph Ledoux really made a breakthrough, and he's still alive. And there's, I've given in the references, he has an institute, an emotional brain institute, EB, or emotional brain mind institute. Anyway, you'll see the link in your references. And it's an excellent link describing his research in greater detail. He basically said that there are neural pathways that carry messages between cognition and emotions, and that you really cannot separate the two. Whenever an event happens or we are triggered, these neural pathways are constantly communicating with each other. He also discovered that the emotions move faster through the neural pathways than cognition does. And he proposed that sometimes we can be that emotions can supersede rationality in major events. And that I think we all are aware of. Sometimes we cannot stop ourselves. The second scientist in that time, who's a pharmacologist and a neuroscientist, and she's still living, and she also has a wonderful website, is Candace Pert. And she said, she discovered as a pharmacologist that the molecules that we have in our body carry emotional messages. And she further discovered that the neuropeptides within the molecules carry emotions. So emotions run all through our body. But she found that neuropeptides are particularly proliferate and active in the gut. That's an interesting finding. How much of the emotional message are we getting from our gut? Food for thought. Paul Ekman, who did research in different cultures on emotions, and he looked at how facial features shift when we are expressing emotions. And what he discovered is that expression alone is sufficient to create marked changes in the autonomic nervous system, a tremendous validation for how body and emotions are linked. If we change our facial expression, it creates an impact in our autonomic nervous system, which is the seat of emotions. By making the correct expression, you begin to have the changes in your physiology that accompany the emotion. Very interesting. And he found 7 emotions that are universal across cultures. And I won't go into it, but if you go to his reference, which is again in the list that you will get, he has an atlas of emotions which you can sort of interactively work with. Great resource. The body-emotion connection. The next scientist who delved into emotions is Bessel van Kolk, and his interest was trauma. And what he discovered is that traumatic events can actually inhibit a person's ability to observe things clearly. So what happens is emotions are stored in the body, and if there is a trigger for a person who's holding traumatic emotions in the body, that event will cause that person to react in a completely unpredictable manner, which is because of the trauma that is held in the body. So what are the implications for coaching? Before I go there, just let me also mention that Bessel van Kolk learned then, and his institute is also worth looking into. I attended a webinar offered by him and his partner, and they're doing some great work in their institute. So he also found that people with trauma cannot access emotions like normal people. They have pretty much numbed themselves. So one way to access some of that buried memory is to, or that trauma, is to address it through the body. So yoga, massage therapy, music therapy, these are some of the things that his institute, acupuncture, is using to help people who are holding traumatic memories. So what are the implications for coaching? One, to me, and this is certainly not a complete list, I encourage you to add to this, the body viscerally holds memories and access to emotion, but however, the access to emotions and new learning may only be possible through somatic work. And a second implication is, how can we recognize trauma in our clients? And when we do, what is our responsibility? This is really an ethical question. And I know next year we're going to be offering a webinar on ethics, so I'm eagerly looking forward to that. But these are a couple of questions that arose for me as I looked at his work. So I'm going to keep moving. The next theory that really plays a role for us as coaches working in the emotional domain is the polyvagal theory, which contends that the vagus nerve is like a superhighway carrying information between the brain and the internal organs. And when we are at rest, we really can pick up cues from each other's nervous system. The vagus nerve includes the nervous system. So what are some implications for coaching? That we are human beings, we are also social beings. And when there is felt safety in the environment and we feel heard and listened to, we are able to co-regulate with each other's nervous systems and create connection. Last month, we had a webinar on the coherent coach. And there was a lot of talk about how coherence develops in groups over time. And it's the same principle here, that if you feel a sense of safety, belonging, connection, there is an attunement. There is a co-regulation with each other's nervous system. This is an interesting concept for us because when we do one-on-one coaching, we've all had experiences where we felt deeply connected with our clients. And we sort of have felt how our nervous systems are attuned to each other. Even our body can pick up cues as to what is going on, not only with us, but with the person sitting in front of us. So it all seems to sort of fall together as all of it seems to make sense. There's this scientific evidence for the way we feel, and that seems very validating to me. So I sort of drew up a list of basic emotions. One list I took from Coaching to the Human Soul, which is written by Alan Seiler. He's an Australian, and he's trained as an ontological coach. And the next list I picked up from a book on yoga. It's called The Yoga of 9 Emotions. So it comes from the Eastern tradition. And then I put them side by side. And I said, what is the difference? I was just curious. And what I discovered is exactly what's in front of you. And the ones in color are the ones that are different. So surprise and shame are in the Western list. Courage and calmness are in the Eastern list. And they sort of are unique to each tradition. I don't know what to make of this, but I just found it interesting. So we are going to now move into one of the frameworks that I would like to introduce you to. I'm going to move out of the share for a couple of minutes. And before we go there, we've talked quite a bit about the link between body and emotions. And I thought it would be interesting to do a small exercise or a practice on sensing the body. As Kerry had mentioned, part of my training is as a somatic coach, and I like to bring the body into the picture because I feel it brings the whole of us into the picture. So what I'd like to do is to invite you to just sit back in your seats, and if you're willing, just engage with the instructions that I'm going to offer you. So I want you to begin to have some awareness of your feet and your legs. Your seat on the chair, the back resting against a support or not. Sort of feel your spine, the back of your head, the front of your head. Just bring your attention to any sensations you are feeling in the body. Just awareness, no judgment. Take a deep breath. And allow your shoulders, your back to relax even more. And another deep breath that goes right down to your feet. And allow yourself to relax just a little more. Becoming aware of the sensations, just awareness. Noticing what parts of the body are tense. Noticing what is alive in you. From the information that has just been shared. Just noticing. Not thinking, as just bringing attention to the sensations in the body. Noticing how the breath travels through your body. Noticing the temperature. Noticing any tingling, any pressure, any warmth anywhere in the body. Just noticing and letting go. Taking another couple of deep breaths. We will come back to the room to be together. So I'd like to invite you to put a couple of words in the chat if there's anything that you noticed in the body. Mm. Mm. Thank you. Tension, heat, grounded, heavy, heart beating, calmness. Tension, tension, still and calm. Shivers and calmness. Thank you all. So one thing that bringing your attention to sensations in the body does, whether you like it or not, brings you to the present moment. So I just want us all to acknowledge the beauty of that, moving out of the past, out of the future, and into the present. and a simple attention to sensing the body. I just find it so powerful. An excellent preparation for coaching in the emotional domain, because then you can really be tuned in to your client in a different way. And that's really why I wanted to offer you this, because it's so important, a part of my best practice when I coach. Okay, let's transition to language and emotions. I'm going to share the slide deck again. And we are now at 2:37. So I just want to be aware of where I am in terms of time. Okay. We are going to sort of, our first framework is about how emotions can be deciphered from the language that we use. Emotions are embedded in our languaging. According to Maturana, a conversation is the braiding of emotions and language. When we speak, our narrative structures present in language as stories, interpretations, opinions, etc., etc. And all of these narrative structures also have an emotion embedded in them. Emotions arise in a system of hopes, desires, expectations, intentions. And very often we don't know what that is. So given that, we will respect that. The example I'm going to share with you in terms of reconstructing language in reconstructing emotions from language, it's a very simple, simplistic example, but I'm hoping that it'll give us a structure which can be useful in slightly more complex situations as well. When we are in the grip of an emotion, many things happen. Our nervous system activates, actions and words arise, memories arise, interpretations arise. And here's an example. Our client, let's assume, is driving. When they suddenly find themselves on the road with a driver who cuts in front of them unexpectedly, suddenly, and dangerously. And the narrative and language that arises when they begin to tell the story after the event is, I almost got killed. The driver next to me cut into my lane. They're irresponsible and a terrible driver. He's a jerk. He doesn't deserve to drive. That's the story I hear from my client. What do I do? So this actually gives me a fair amount of material. I almost got killed is the story. A driver cut into my lane is a true assertion. They're irresponsible and a terrible driver. That's an assessment, a judgment that is made by my client, and he does not deserve to drive. That's a declaration. It's a conclusion. He or she has reached this conclusion. So this model is very simplistic. Emotions arise in a system of expectations, desires, intentions, and these have been overly simplified here. We don't even know the background of this client, although in real life, we might know a little more. So let's look at the elements of language. There's the story, our narrative about what happened, and it has certain emotional content in it. by way of descriptions and assessments. And this comes at us very often from our clients' stories. If we look at those stories, there are some true assertions there, things that actually happened. In this case, person X in red car came off the highway ramp, cut across the right and middle lanes to the left lane, right in front of me or the client. That's a true assertion. An assessment is a judgment of what the event means and the emotion it evokes. And we find this in stories that our clients tell. This person is irresponsible, he's a jerk, this is the way I'm being threatened, etc., etc. And finally, there's the conclusion, a declaration of what it should be like. So, how can we help our clients separate these elements in their stories, and what value might that have? In my sort of experience, the real genuine value comes from helping our clients separate their assertions from their assessments. Assertions is what actually happened. Assessment is a judgment. I'll share a simple example with you. I had a client, and this is a real life example. She kept, in our conversations, what would arise is the assumption that she's a terrible leader. And what I was gathering from our conversations was that she's actually sounded like a pretty good leader. So I invited her to ground her assessment or collect some evidence around it, to actually find some proof whether she was a leader, a good leader or not. So she developed a little survey and she shared it with her team. And she said, I'm looking for feedback on myself. Would you mind? They all completed it. And she came back and she said, you know, I'm a pretty good leader. So grounding assessments can be a very powerful way of making our of sort of validating our assessments. In this case, it's a judgment. The guy is irresponsible, he's a jerk. But if my client was to collect a little more data, he may change his opinion. Maybe there was an urgency, maybe there was an emergency. Maybe the guy was new, who knows? But grounding an assessment can be a very powerful move in our coaching, helping our clients ground their assessments. So assessments, of course, can be about an event, as they are in this case. Let me go to the next slide. But there is also an assessment sometimes that we make about ourselves. A master assessment that I've heard many people make is, I'm not good enough. And it really impacts their choices in life. So there are some assessments in life that can have a very powerful impact. And that takes me to the second model that I want to introduce to you. And before we go there, I just want you to try a quick reflective practice on what we've talked about just now. I'm just wondering if there is time to do this. You know, I'm going to let you do this on your own because there's very little time. We've only got 15 more minutes. I'm going to move into the next model. What is the difference? And I'm sharing this distinction between moods and emotions before we move to the next model, because the next model has more of a mood. You know, how do we what happens with moods? How are they formed? So I want to talk a little bit about the distinction between moods and emotions before we go there. Moods are a special domain of emotions, longer lasting, and they become the lens through which we see the world. So I'm an anxious person. A mood. I'm usually not successful in these conditions. You've already created a preconceived mood. Some people are constantly resigned. It's not going to work, etc., etc. I think you get the idea. Moods stay and become a way of being. A sustained emotion can potentially become a mood, and they are important because they color the lens through which we look at the world. So two fundamental assumptions that create a certain, let me just read out this. The basis of our model now is two fundamental assumptions that we make about life. There are certain things we believe are possible in life, and there are certain other things we believe are not possible in life. Sometimes our belief about what is not possible is not grounded, and sometimes it is. I'll share a quick example. In the late 70s, I had finished my graduate studies and I had started working. I was living and working in India at that time. And I realized I really wanted to work in the area of human development in organizations. And I was working with an organization at that time in their, what they called their human resources department. And I looked around and I saw, I was there for about 2 years, and I realized there is going to be absolutely no way I'm going to have any opportunities to work with executive development, training, designing, etc., if I'm in this place or in any other place, because there was just not enough opportunity. And it truly felt like there was no possibility for change. And I could have given up, but I decided I would change the horizon, and I would look outside of the country to see what was possible. And that's what brought me to the United States. So sometimes there are no possibilities for change, but whether you accept it or not is a very important domain of the mood you may find yourself in. So given these two fundamental assumptions, possibility for change or no possibility for change, the other dimension that is important is, do we accept or do we not accept this? Is there acceptance? Had I accepted there's no possibility for change, I would still be in India doing whatever I'm doing. I did not accept that possibility. And I said, there is possibility for change. It's just that I have to look beyond. So what happens if I accept that there is possibility for change? There's ambition, enthusiasm. And if I do not accept possibility for change, there's resignation. And when there really is no possibility for change, if I accept it, there's acceptance, there's peace. But if no change is possible in reality, and you have grounded that assessment, and you do not accept it, then there is resentment. Yeah, take the example of a loss of somebody you love. No change is possible there. If you do not accept it, the grieving conceivably can turn into resentment. That's an example. So this framework really helps us sometimes with some of our clients who carry a mood of resignation or resentment or ambition or acceptance. So I also have a reflective practice here for you, which I'm going to sort of allow you to work on at home. It'll just help deepen what we have talked about and allow you to apply it to yourself, which brings me to the last slide in my deck, which is best practices when coaching in the emotional domain. I invite you to be aware of what you're feeling, what your mood is, and what you may be generating, because remember, the vagus nerve is communicating. Sensing and listening with your body will often deliver clues to your client's emotions, assuming you are in a neutral place and able to sense and listen with your whole self. Coaching in the emotional domain requires an embodied presence. You have to be walking your talk. And to have life experiences where your emotions have been felt are actually an asset for you as a coach, because they help you have a more embodied presence when you're working with your clients. And the last but not least is we are always a learner in the emotional domain. There's no limit to what we can explore in ourselves and with our clients. So there's always new learning. And you never really arrive. You're always walking the path. So I'll close with that, and I'd love to know if you have any questions.
Deepa, there was a question earlier, and I'm wondering if you'd be willing to throw out some of your favorite coaching moves on how you might sink a client into emotional awareness. Maybe some questions you might ask to help them tap in to understanding their own emotion.
Yeah. You know, what comes up for me may not be a response to your question, but it may be. What comes up for me is that some clients cannot feel their emotions at all. They're numb. And it's okay. I don't push them. It's not my job. They have to move themselves. I do provide a space where they can move, but I don't try to push them. So utmost respect for where the client is, and allow them even to acknowledge their numbness. That's an emotion too. So I leave it there.
Thank you, Deepa. In our remaining 5 minutes, I welcome you guys to ask Deepa a question directly and take yourself off mute. There's been some lovely comments as well, Deepa, in the chat. I know Eugenia was wondering about when the vagus nerve is damaged and how that might, impact the client as well.
Yeah, do you want to sort of say a little more about that, Eugenia, in terms of how it manifests?
There was a situation where there was a brain aneurysm, and in order to intervene, they needed to, they couldn't do coiling, so they needed to actually go into the brain. And because of the placement of the aneurysm, it did damage to the vagus nerve. So how would then one relate to this type of patient, or help this patient go through exactly how would we connect with this patient if that connection can't be there?
Yeah, that's a very good question. You would really have to connect with them exactly where they are. And depending on what their goals are, what their objective in their work with you is, I think it's important to be aware of if emotions are completely missing, then what's possible in that situation.
Right.
And to work with the client in that space where emotions cannot be accessed. And
That must feel frustrating.
To the coach, it could, but if you take it on, you have committed to it, right?
Yeah.
There's another really great question from Josie around, there are going to be times when deep emotion is expressed. How do we reset ourselves as coaches after a session when that occurs?
Yeah, that's a commonly asked question, and often is asked as, I'm overwhelmed by the client's emotions. How do I reset? Breathe, regulate yourself. The art of self-regulation is really important. And each one of us has our own way of doing it. And then I would really process that overwhelm for me as a coach. What did it trigger in me that I got so overwhelmed? I really would pursue that inquiry. Always, the overwhelm is mine. Nobody's overwhelming me. Nobody.
Oh, it's also a great opportunity to explore that within the relationship of supervision. When you continue to work with a client that creates that well of emotion in you, what does that mean, and how do you process that?
Absolutely. And I say, reset, self-regulate, and look at yourself. Ask yourself the question, what did it trigger in me?
This is actually a great way of wrapping up, because I want to put in a plug for our next webinar in January, which is about coaching supervision in the Americas. And, the role that supervision can have in our profession as coaches, which can be very isolating, and that we don't have the ability to share our experience with clients because of the confidentiality we bring to our work. And I think some of the things Deep is talking about is so essential for deep client work. And yet, how do we manage our own reactions to that work? So, Deepa, I just want to thank you so deeply for your time and your generousness in sharing your research, your evidence-based approach with us. We're at the top of the hour. I did put the link in. Please complete that if you need an ICF CEU. And I hope you have a lovely day. And I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.
Deepa, I just